My name is Emily. I'm 40 years old, and I have two beautiful children, and my husband, Michael, who's now 45, and I have been married for 18 years. When we first got married, I was truly happy. Michael was warm and gentle. He smiled every morning, like the sun had risen just for us. And he whispered, "I love you," like a promise stitched into the air. And I believed him, because I wanted that forever kind of love. The kind you build slow and steady, brick by brick. So when our first child came 2 years later, a bright-eyed boy we named Ethan, who filled our world with laughter and curiosity, I thought life couldn't be more complete. And then 2 years later came Ava, our little girl with a voice like morning bird song and a heart full of kindness. In those early days, Michael was a good man. He worked hard, brought home enough for us to live simply. And I stayed back with the kids, cooked meals with love, cleaned every corner, and taught them how to read, how to dream, how to be gentle. But somewhere along the road, something in him shifted. Nights got longer, his trips more frequent. The warmth in his eyes dimmed like a fading fire. And when I asked where he was going, or why he stopped saying those words, he snapped, "I work for this family. Stop asking questions." And though his words hurt, I stayed silent because I loved him. I believed if I just held on, maybe he'd find his way back to us. But 7 years ago, he left for another business trip, and I found 2 plane tickets in his coat pocket, one with a woman's name I didn't recognize, and my chest cracked open with a pain I'd never known. I cried for 3 days straight, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just sat in the quiet, wondering when love turned into a lie. And when Michael came back, I asked him who she was. He said, "She's nobody, don't worry." But I wasn't stupid. I just didn't want to tear my family apart. Ethan was just 3, and Ava still played with dolls, so I swallowed my heartbreak, told myself I'd be strong. But the truth is, over the years, Michael kept going. And though he never admitted it, I knew she was still in the picture. And something inside me slowly died. I cleaned our house, but it didn't feel like home. I cooked meals without joy. I looked at my husband, and all I saw was a stranger. Then one day, by chance, I ran into someone from my past. His name was Daniel, an old friend from long ago, and I saw him with his wife. The way he opened the car door for her. The way he helped her with her coat like she mattered. And something in my chest ached. Not for him, but for the kind of love I never had. Daniel and I began to talk again. Simple conversations at first. He asked me how I was, and I lied. Said, "I'm fine." But he looked at me like he could see past it. He said, "Emily, you matter. You're stronger than you think." And for the first time in years, I felt seen. I felt alive. I smiled. I laughed. And for 3 months we spoke. No big gifts or declarations. Just kindness and quiet understanding. But then Michael found out. And he was furious, shouting, slamming doors, asking me how I could do this. And I told him, because I needed to feel loved. And we talked for hours that night, voices cracking, eyes wet. And he cried, said, "I love you, please don't leave." And I asked, "Why now? After 18 years? And he said, "I didn't know you were hurting." And a week later, I got sick, really sick, rushed to the hospital. And Michael never left my side. Held my hand like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Whispered again, "Don't leave me. I love you." And for only the second time in nearly 2 decades, I believed he meant it. Now Michael sleeps beside me every night. But somewhere out there, I know she's still waiting for him. And I don't know where our story goes next. My heart is tired. worn thin from years of holding on. But I smile for Ethan and Ava. Try to be strong for them, because they deserve joy even if I'm still searching for mine. I know I've made mistakes too. I'm not perfect, but all I ever wanted was to feel wanted. And after everything, I still don't know what the future holds, but I hope, quietly, for peace. I began to think more deeply about who I am and what I want. Spent nights staring at the ceiling while the world slept, asking myself, should I stay? Should I leave? What do my children need? And what about me? Michael tried to change, started coming home earlier, doing little things like taking out the trash or washing dishes. And though they were small gestures, I noticed them. But my heart stayed guarded. When I looked at him, I didn't see the boy I fell in love with. I saw a man who let me hurt alone. One night we were all having dinner. Ethan was telling a funny story, and Ava was giggling. And for a moment it felt normal, happy. But after dinner I turned to Ethan and asked, "Do you think your dad and I are happy?" And he paused, surprised, and said, "I don't know, Mom. You're nice to each other, but sometimes I think you're sad." And Ava, sweet and soft, said, "Mom, I just want us to stay together." And I cried quietly, because I realized they knew more than I thought. I didn't want to fake a smile forever, so one day, I went to visit Daniel for the last time. We hadn't spoken since everything happened, and I just needed to say goodbye. When I saw him, he smiled and asked, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm trying." And he nodded, said, "You're strong, Emily. You'll find your way." And I thanked him and said, "You reminded me that I matter." Then I walked away, knowing it was the last time. I went home and sat down with Michael and said, "We need to be honest. Do you want this to work?" And he said yes, said he still loved me and wanted us to stay. And I asked, "Can you leave her behind? Can you love me the way I need to be loved?" And he said, "I'll try." But I told him, "Trying isn't enough. I need you to mean it." And so we began again, slow like winter turning into spring, taking walks, talking about simple things like weather and kids. And I started to feel a flicker of hope, but the pain still sat quietly in the corners of my heart. Forgiving Michael was the hardest thing I've ever done, because the past kept whispering. I remembered the nights I cried alone, the name Rachel printed on that plane ticket. And I also remembered my own mistakes, my time with Daniel, the moments that made me feel alive. One day I looked in the mirror and said, "Emily, you've made mistakes too, but you are not broken." And if I wanted peace, I had to forgive. Now I take life one day at a time. We're still together, though the wounds haven't all healed. And even when he says he loves me, a small voice inside still wonders. I focus on Ethan and Ava, try to give them the love they deserve, and I focus on me. I started reading again, walking alone in the park, and one day I wrote a letter to myself that said, "Dear Emily, you are strong, you are kind, you matter. Life will hurt, but you will rise. Love yourself first, then love others, and never forget, you deserve happiness." And I keep that letter in my drawer, and when the days feel heavy, I read it, and it helps. This journey taught me that love isn't just saying the words, it's in the everyday care, the respect, the showing up. It taught me that people are flawed, but they can grow. And most of all, it taught me that I am strong enough to carry sadness, to rise from betrayal, and to still search for light, one day at a time. If this story touched your heart, if even for a moment you felt seen, understood, or not alone, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your one click isn't just a number, It's a sign that these stories matter, that someone out there is listening, feeling, healing. We pour our hearts into every word, and we want you to be with us for every story that's yet to come. So please, subscribe and stay with us on this journey. Your support means the world.